Sometimes, when the walls close in and everything falls apart, the only way forward is to do the unthinkable, even if it leads to absurd consequences. Nicole, my wife, had always been stunning. Too stunning, really. Almost tempting, if I were in the habit of swallowing poison. She moved through the crowd of smug executives that pretended to run Apex Limited, though in reality the actual work happened far below their cushy perches. If any of them ever descended to that level, they'd probably reach terminal velocity before hitting the ground. Nicole wore a bespoke suit, tailored to perfection. The skirt was cut just short enough, the top fitted just tight enough. Perhaps a bit too daring for a corporate setting, but that was Nicole. She had the kind of legs that turned heads and curves that could disarm a room, and she used them well. Just not for me. Not anymore. The group of well-fed executives, accompanied by their ever-slim, ever-attractive assistants, entered the boardroom. As they took in the sight of me sitting at the far end of the long, gleaming oak table, Gregory Remington's usual throne, they froze. Remington, the all-powerful chairman, wasn't accustomed to finding his seat occupied. On one side of me sat Winslow and Pemberton, on the other, Ashford. We weren't just attendees, we were the ambush team. Marissa, our stenographer, sat ready with her shorthand, her pen already gliding across the page, recording every word. Remington, known for his blunt, no-filter style, wasted no time. "Who the heck are you?" I smiled. "Nolan Mercer, gentlemen." Nicole's head snapped in my direction. She had been cozying up to Brandon Forbes something or other from marketing and hadn't noticed me until I spoke. Now, she rushed to my side, her face a mask of concern. "Nolan, what are you doing here?" I kept my tone light. "Mrs. Mercer, you're the assistant marketing director, correct?" She hesitated, trying to piece together what was happening. "Of course, you know that. Now, leave, right now." "Why don't you take a seat instead?" I gestured toward the empty chair. "Though I do find it odd that an assistant marketing director is needed at a board meeting. Shouldn't you be working? Instead, you're taking an extended lunch and somehow part of a high-level discussion." Her expression hardened. "Nolan, you're making a scene. Leave now." I met her glare. "Nicole, I think we're well past the point of embarrassment. I'm exactly where I need to be, so take a seat and let's see how this plays out." "Nolan, we'll talk at home. Just go." Her whisper had been sharp up until that point, but as frustration took over, her voice rose sharply. Remington cut back in, his irritation mounting. "Somebody get security in here. And once we find out who let these clowns in, someone's losing their job." Ashford leaned forward. "An extraordinary shareholders meeting is now in session, gentlemen. Security is aware of our presence and our legal right to be here." Remington shot him a look of pure disbelief. "And who the heck are you?" The man didn't flinch. "Edwin Ashford, senior partner of Ashford, and Pemberton." Remington scoffed. "Never heard of you." "We're the company's auditors." Remington folded his arms. "And what exactly are you doing here?" "I'm here to ensure that this extraordinary shareholders meeting follows the regulations set forth by the Companies Act, including the amendments from 2006 and 2013. Remington shook his head, exasperated. "Look, I don't know what scam you're trying to pull, but I'm not buying it, so get the heck out of my building." Ashford remained unfazed. "Mr. Remington, the building belongs to the company, and the company belongs to the shareholders." Remington let out a barking laugh. "I own the damn shareholders. Now get out, and somebody stop that woman from writing things down." Marissa, without missing a beat, looked up and flashed Remington a sweet, unfazed smile. She really was something else. That smile, the way she adjusted her black-framed glasses, the way she tucked a stray strand of blonde hair behind her ear. Yeah, I noticed. And my stomach did a little flip. "Not the time, Mercer, but still, damn." She scribbled away as Delaney, the CFO, cleared his throat. "Shareholders' meetings require prior notification and must be held in a venue accessible to all shareholders." "This is an extraordinary shareholders' meeting, Mr. Delaney," Ashford stated. Then, glancing at Marissa, he added, "Marissa, could you confirm if I made that clear earlier?" Marissa barely looked up from her notes. "Yes, Mr. Ashford, you stated, an extraordinary meeting of shareholders is now in session." To which Mr. Remington responded, "Who the hell are you?" I grinned. I couldn't help it. There was something about the way Marissa repeated Remington's own words with cool detachment that was deeply satisfying. "Notices were sent out 2 days ago. Ashford continued, in full compliance with regulations. That's absurd, Cross, the company secretary, scoffed. I never received any such notification. I would have been the first to know. Ashford didn't even blink. And yet, our records indicate that the email was received and marked as read. Cross smirked. Not by me, it wasn't. It seems you haven't been around for the past 2 days. I believe you were off on a team-building exercise. Odd choice to schedule that in the middle of the week, but then again, you set the policies. Remington scoffed. I make the policies, and you can shove it. If I say it happens midweek, then that's how it is. Ashford remained unfazed. Of course, Mr. Remington. And as it happens, my audit clerks are currently reviewing the accounts and receipts for those team-building days. I couldn't resist adding my own commentary. Oh dear, have you all been naughty little kittens? Remington turned on his CFO. Fortune, get down there and put a stop to this. I'm not having a bunch of nobodies wandering in and digging through our financials. Vincent Fortune paled noticeably. You feeling all right, Vincent? I asked, tilting my head. You're looking a little queasy, but I'm sure everything about that team-building retreat was completely above board. It wouldn't have been, say, an excuse to check into a 5-star hotel, get drunk, and, well, let's just say, engage in extracurricular activities with the assistants. Nolan? Winslow shot me a warning look and placed a hand on my arm. I feigned innocence. What? I just said I was sure that wasn't the case. Winslow gave me a pointed look. As the legal mind in our group, he had every right to. Ashford, ever the picture of composure, redirected the conversation. Mr. Remington, I'd recommend keeping Mr. Fortune present for this meeting. According to the shareholder register, he holds a significant stake in the company and may wish to cast his vote. Remington barely contained his irritation. He votes how I tell him to vote. The board members, along with their ever-polished assistants, still lingered at the far end of the table, shifting uncomfortably. Gentlemen, Ashford gestured toward the chairs, please take your seats so we can begin with the first item on the agenda. There is no damn agenda, Remington barked. Oh, but there is, I said smoothly, sliding a sheet of paper forward. Marissa had wisely talked me out of scrawling it in purple crayon, which, given how much of a circus this place was, had been my first instinct. I never received any agenda, Cross, the company secretary, objected. This meeting isn't valid, I signaled to Marissa. She reached for her phone, which appeared from somewhere I couldn't quite place. Her fitted silk dress left no room for pockets. Trust me, I would have noticed. She murmured a few words into the device, then tucked it away just as effortlessly. Remington continued muttering threats, but the fight in his voice was waning. A moment later, a young man in a sleek suit entered, carrying a laptop. Ah, Clark, Ashford greeted him. If you'd be so kind as to open Mr. Cross's laptop, he will enter his password. Clark placed the device in front of the company secretary. Cross hesitated, his hand hovering over the keyboard. Winslow leaned in slightly. Mr. Cross, I strongly advise against any rash decisions. Mr. Clark is here to ensure compliance, and I assure you, interfering now would be unfortunate. The entire room seemed to register, all at once, that Clark, despite his polished appearance, was far more intimidating than an ordinary audit clerk should be. Without another word, Cross entered his password. The second his inbox opened, his face drained of color, beads of sweat forming at his temple. He had found the email. Ashford continued as if nothing had happened. The notice was also posted on the company bulletin board and in the national newspapers. Technically, none of that was even necessary, as we have written agreements to short notice. The email was fabricated. A tech-savvy friend of mine had worked some behind-the-scenes magic, ensuring it appeared to have been sent 2 days ago and marked as read. Don't ask me how. It's good to have friends. However, the notice board and newspaper postings, completely legitimate. The only detail I'd left out was that the newspaper had one of the lowest circulations in the country, buried among the classified ads no businessman would ever read. As for the notice board, it was pinned up in the break room of a tiny factory branch in Scotland. It had taken some creative maneuvering, but technically, everything was legal. Ashford tapped the table lightly. Right. If you gentlemen are more comfortable standing, we'll proceed as is. Mr. Mercer, would you read the first item on the agenda? I rose, straightened my jacket, and fastened the lowest button. My suit wasn't expensive, but it mimicked the cut of the finer ones in the room. Adjusting my tie, I cleared my throat, letting the moment stretch. Every eye in the room was locked on me, including Nicole's. She was seething, but she still couldn't look away. "Thank you, Mr. Ashford." I turned to the assembled group. "Gentlemen, the first item on the agenda is a motion of no confidence in the current board of this company and the immediate removal of all its members." For a beat, silence hung in the air. Then the room erupted. Laughter, outrage, and sheer disbelief crashed together in a storm of voices. Some were braying like donkeys, others bellowing like bears, and a fair few let out high-pitched squeals. It sounded less like a boardroom and more like a particularly rowdy bar on championship night. Or, perhaps more fittingly, a live reading of Animal Farm. Nicole, meanwhile, had practically melted into her chair, as if willing herself to disappear. She no longer even attempted to meet my eyes. "Any discussion on item 1, gentlemen?" I asked over the noise. Remington didn't hesitate. His glare locked onto me with venom. "What's to discuss?" he sneered. "I know you. You're Mercer's deadbeat husband, aren't you? The bricklayer. Maybe instead of swinging a hammer all day, you should have used your head and taken advice from her. She knows what she's doing, and trust me, she's damn good at it too." Remington arched an eyebrow and swept his gaze across the room, his smirk widening as his colleagues followed suit, taking their seats. Each of them glanced between Nicole and me, exchanging knowing grins. If her little secret had been safe before, it certainly wasn't anymore. She had been exposed for exactly who she was. Her face flushed crimson, eyes glistening with unshed tears. She slumped lower in her chair, as if trying to make herself invisible. "You idiots might have pulled off this little stunt, but you clearly have no clue how a real business operates," Remington scoffed, leaning back in his chair like a man who had already won. "This is a publicly traded company, not some backwoods turkey farm outside the M25. You don't get a say in how this place runs. My company, my rules." His voice hardened. "Now, be a good little pest and crawl back into whatever hole you came from. You were amusing for a moment, but now you're just a damn irritation." Ashford, unfazed as ever, simply continued. "Any further discussion on the first item on the agenda?" His question was met with nothing but sneers and quiet chuckles from the board members, their assistants standing behind them, smirking at the absurdity of it all. Ashford allowed a moment of silence before moving forward. "Then we proceed to the vote on the motion. That all current board members of Apex Limited be removed and replaced immediately. Those in favor?" I raised my hand. Remington let out a sharp laugh. "You? You actually own shares?" I nodded. From the corner of my eye, I saw Nicole glance at me in shock. "How many?" Remington asked, voice dripping with mockery. 100 shares, I replied evenly. "Bought and paid for." Nicole dropped her gaze, her expression twisting with something that looked like humiliation. Not over the situation, over me. She had spent years molding herself into the perfect corporate accessory, eagerly learning from the businessmen she admired. And now, here I was, an embarrassment by association. She slid her wedding ring off her finger and slipped it into her pocket. Oddly enough, the sight didn't sting the way I thought it would. If anything, I was more surprised at how little I cared. Marissa caught my eye and smiled, a small but warm gesture. I wrinkled my nose at her playfully. Just a little twitch. She liked that, and her smile grew wider. Remington, meanwhile, was practically doubled over in laughter. 100 shares? What's that worth? £2? Ashford remained composed. Those opposed? The laughter continued, but no hands went up. Then, if there are no votes against, Delaney suddenly straightened. I vote against. Remington wiped at his eyes, still chuckling. Are you serious? Delaney shot him a pointed look. The vote was about to pass. He only owns 100 shares, but no one was voting against him. Remington's laughter died instantly. His bushy brows furrowed as his gaze snapped to me. You sneaky little snake. This was a setup. You planned this from the start. He practically spat the words. You almost got us to laugh ourselves right into a trap. He exhaled sharply, eyes narrowing. But it won't work. I own 83 million shares, and I vote against this proposal. Now get the hell out of my building and take your little band of misfits with you. If you ever set foot here again, I'll have you locked up so tight you won't be able to show your face around here again. Suddenly, a wave of hands shot up around the table, all voting against the motion. It wasn't looking good for us. Ashford, however, remained methodical, noting each vote carefully, cross-checking them against the share register to confirm the exact count. That brings us to a total of 242 million shares opposed to the motion, he said calmly. That accounts for 27.62% of all issued shares. The motion is accepted. Remington jerked upright in his seat. Get out of my... He stopped short, his face twisted in confusion. Wait, what did you just say? Cross shot up from his chair. Accepted? What the hell do you mean, accepted? Remington's head snapped toward Ashford. You meant rejected, right? That's what you meant to say. Ashford gave a small, knowing smile. No, Mr. Remington, my statement was clear. The motion has passed. The room, once filled with jeers and laughter, now erupted with something else entirely. Denials, disbelief, and outright shouting. The smirks had vanished. The board members were suddenly scrambling to understand what had just happened. Listen, Ashford, or whatever your damn name is, Remington growled. You don't just get to declare something into existence. That's not how this works. Ashford exhaled, patience unwavering. I assure you, Mr. Remington, I know corporate procedure better than anyone in this room. I know exactly what I'm saying. Then say it plainly, because right now you sound like a con artist trying to pull a fast one. Mr. Remington, the numbers are simple, Ashford said smoothly. 27.62% of shares, those owned by the individuals in this room, voted against the motion. However, 58.98% of shares voted in favor. As a result, the motion has passed. Remington's jaw went slack. What? He blinked rapidly. Where the hell do you get 58%? He only has 100 shares. I took my time standing up, adjusting my jacket before addressing the room. It comes from proxies, I said, which gave me the right to vote on behalf of their shares. I let my words settle in before delivering the final blow, and I just used them to throw all of you, dishonest, scheming frauds, out onto the street. Nicole was staring at me now, wide-eyed. She wasn't the only one. Remington's face was practically purple. That's impossible. There's no way you had that many proxies. I smiled. But I did, Remington. I asked for them. And they gave them to me. For this meeting? For today? Exactly. That would have cost you millions, I shrugged. Not at all. Just knowing the right people to talk to. And, as it turns out, most of them really don't like you. It had taken weeks to pull everything together. Ever since that moment in the executive restroom, when I overheard two board members talking while I was up in the ceiling, searching for the source of a leak. Nicole had arranged the job for me, probably as a way to assuage her own guilt. A convenient excuse to toss me a favor while keeping me at arm's length. That Mercer woman is something else, one of them said, Beckett, if I recognized the voice correctly, the sales director. There was only one Mercer in this building they could be referring to, and it wasn't exactly a genius-level deduction to figure out who, considering she was working just one floor below. You think Remington is going to share this time? The other one asked, his tone laced with amusement. It might have been Nicole's direct boss. He likes to keep her close, right under his wing where he can have her any time he pleases, Beckett replied. Though it's been over 2 years, maybe he's finally tired of her and feeling generous. Should have been at the Christmas party, the other one mused. I thought he was going to pass her around, but the greedy bastard wasn't having it, kept her under the table, going at it, even while her clueless husband was wandering around looking for her. The two of them erupted into laughter. Tucked under his gut, you mean, the other man wheezed. I'm surprised she hasn't been flattened by now. More laughter, then the zippers. The door opened in footsteps, and then no sound. I waited a beat and then said into the silence, "Wash your damn hands, you filthy pigs." My head spun. For one brief second, I actually wondered how much it would hurt if I lost my balance and crashed through the false ceiling. A part of me almost wished it would. Maybe it would drown out the pain clawing at my chest. But now, at least, everything made sense. I had suspected Nicole was having an affair for some time. The way her expression flickered at the most basic questions. The subtle changes in her wardrobe, most especially lingerie. The hushed phone calls taken out of earshot. How intimacy had dwindled to nothing, then suddenly surged for no reason, only to fade again just as quickly. All classic signs. But I had been looking in the wrong places. I'd assumed it was someone from our social circle, some well-dressed, polished guy, someone smooth and successful, the kind of man Nicole would see as an upgrade. Not this. not some bloated, self-important little tyrant with a belly bigger than his ego. So, it had been more than 2 years since that sleazy old bastard first lifted his gut onto her body and pawed at her like some obscene privilege. I wondered, just for a second, if he was better at it than me, if he had something I didn't. Then, still crouched up in the rafters, the absurdity hit me. But then I saw this image of him trying to get around his gut, and the ridiculousness made me giggle. Unfortunately, those giggles morphed into something else, and before I knew it, I was crying. The final death of a marriage, no matter how long it has been on life support cutting deep, is a reality. I sat there for a long time, sniffling and wallowing, feeling sorry for myself. Then, the anger came. First, the kind that flares up like a matchstick, revenge, maybe even wrecking his car. But eventually, the flames died down, and I made myself think, really think. That's when I called in a friend, a person who gave me a pair of small plastic devices, and went on to tell me just what to do with them. I carefully wrote it down so I wouldn't miss a step. The next day, I walked back into the building, toolkit in hand, officially still on the hunt for that leak. I worked in my time, whistling to myself and swearing for added measure. Occasionally, just long enough to reach down between the desk and chair and plug the little devices into unsuspecting laptops, pressing this button and then that in the right order, I would stop. A few more minutes of clattering pipe and grousing at the heat, and then, still whistling, out I'd walk. The best place to hide something is often right out in the open. You'd be amazed at the people you encounter building homes for a living. If you treat them with fairness, respect, and a little humor, you'll be surprised how many friends you can make along the way. One of those friends analyzed the information I gathered. That data set me off on a winding path right to the door of Mr. Ashford. Ashford, in turn, introduced me to Winslow and Pemberton. Over one long, quiet talk in a dimly lit bar, we pieced together the solution to my problem. The method, however, was mine alone. They could only nudge me in the right direction. The rest was up to me. In the end, I found the person I needed to ask and went straight to her. I laid out the situation, and at first she looked sympathetic. But when I showed her what the data revealed, her expression darkened. And when I explained my plan, she laughed, then handed me exactly what I needed. She was in charge of a massive pension fund and had good reason to be concerned. With a significant investment in Apex's shares, she feared the current board's incompetence would send the stock price plummeting. She also gave me an introduction to the next person on my list, and from there, it snowballed. Hedge funds, pension funds, mutual funds, bank investments, I met with them all, carefully laying out what, when, how, and why. And one by one, they handed me another piece of the puzzle. Some did it for profit, knowing they'd make a killing with the right timing. Others did it purely for the satisfaction of seeing Gregory Remington fall. A few did it out of sheer spite. And some just liked the story I told them. Astonishingly, none of them tipped off the wrong people. Somehow the whole thing stayed off the radar. And so, I ended up holding proxies for more than half of a publicly traded company. I had only asked for them for this one meeting. They gave them to me for the entire day. And that day was today. I turned to the room, barely containing my grin. "You're all fired." Then, glancing at Marissa, I added, "Would you be so kind as to inform security? We'll need them to escort these lovely individuals off the premises after the meeting." Marissa actually giggled, her eyes twinkling behind those black-rimmed glasses. She shot me an exaggerated look, huge, playful, almost cartoonish, before working her magic on the phone again. Within a minute, security guards appeared outside the boardroom door, looming like sentinels. The silence in the room was absolute, punctuated only by the occasional frantic whisper. I noticed the smarter assistants had already begun edging away from their former bosses, putting some strategic distance between themselves and the sinking ship. The same men they had clung to so eagerly were now liabilities, not meal tickets. Nicole sat stiffly, watching me like I had just sprouted fangs. I enjoyed that. A little reversal of fortune made for a nice appetizer, and I still had plenty of the main course left to serve. I turned back to Ashford. "What's next on the agenda?" Oh, I knew what was next. I had written the damn thing, but I enjoyed the formality of it all. Ashford, ever professional, consulted the document in front of him. Item 2 on the agenda. A motion that no golden parachutes be awarded to any former members of the board of Apex Limited votes in favor. I raised my hand, grinning like a kid at Christmas. Votes against? A small forest of hands went up. Motion accepted. You can't do that. Cross shot to his feet, his voice shrill with desperation. I have a contract. Cross was normally the type to keep his head down and his hands clasped as if in constant prayer. Except he wasn't praying. He was preying. Specifically, on the younger men in the company, coercing or bribing them for favors. Those little plastic devices I had used to gather intel, they had unearthed complaints against him. Complaints that had been swiftly dismissed by the board as mischief reports. I smiled at him. You do have a contract, Crossy. But, as I recall, your payout is tied to the company's profit ratios over the past few years. Isn't that right, Vincent? Vincent Fortune, the CFO, gave a small nod. The profit ratio is in line with our targets, so there should be no issue fulfilling the contracts. Unless, of course, I continued smoothly, someone's been fiddling the books. Say, manipulating depreciation figures. Vincent went so pale he was practically see-through. That's right, Vincent, I said, my tone almost soothing. Someone's been conveniently delaying depreciation deductions on plant and machinery, vehicles, even buildings, shifting those costs into future years to make the books look better in the present. And while that might be a fun little trick, it also happens to be tax fraud. Vincent swallowed hard, looking like he wanted to melt into his chair. I shook my head in mock disappointment. Oh, Vincent, Vincent, not only were you cheating the tax man, but you were also trying to offload this company right under the shareholders' noses for your own personal gain. Naughty, naughty boy. At that, the room exploded in denials. Board members scrambled to distance themselves, insisting they had no part in it, which was right about when Mr. Winslow spoke up. For the first time, he introduced himself formally. Senior Counsel for His Majesty's Revenue and Customs. Silence. The room went utterly still. Winslow took his time, letting the weight of his title sink in. Then, in the calmest tone imaginable, he informed them that they were now under investigation. He also advised that any attempts to flee the country would be considered highly suspicious and result in immediate detention. As if to punctuate his statement, he gestured subtly toward the security guard standing by the door. The taxman doesn't just come knocking. Sometimes, he's already sitting at the table. Once the noise of panic and pleading died down into pure, undiluted gloom, Ashford picked up where he left off. Item 3, he announced. Motion that the shareholders appoint Mr. Pemberton and his firm to investigate and prosecute any instances of fraud, embezzlement, or self-enrichment at the expense of shareholders. He glanced at me then, and in a quieter voice added, Nolan, you know that malfeasance only applies to public officials, right? I grinned. Yeah, but it's such a great word. Most people don't know what it means, so I figured I'd throw it in there and see if it stuck. Ashford almost allowed himself a smirk, but auditors weren't known for smiling. Probably had something to do with how often they had to deal with tax officials. All in favor of the motion? I raised my hand without hesitation. And against? Only about half of them even bothered. The motion passes, Ashford concluded. That was when Pemberton stood. Thank you, Mr. Ashford. My name is Brandon Pemberton, representing Hudson, Watson, and Pemberton. As of this moment, I am serving as the corporation's legal counsel until a new board is appointed. My team and I will be conducting a thorough investigation. Every document, every byte of data, every member of this organization will be examined. We intend to uncover the full extent of theft, embezzlement, fraud, and general misconduct. He glanced in my direction, and I gave him a slight nod in return. Misconduct that has taken place within this company. Any offenses exceeding the cost of a single paperclip will be pursued to the fullest extent of the law. Witness testimony and statements regarding such practices will be taken into consideration when determining culpability. Those wishing to provide statements may do so at my office on the second floor. No need to trample one another in the rush. He took his seat, and Ashford moved to the next item on the agenda. Nolan, I can't say this. You really want this entered into the public record? I nodded. With a sigh, he continued. The motion states that all board members will personally, individually, and collectively apologize to Mr. Mercer for their, let's call it, inappropriate involvement with his wife, whether individually, in groups, or, astonishingly, in shifts over the past 2 years. Furthermore, Mrs. Mercer will be required to undergo a full medical examination to ensure she is free of any infections, bacteria, parasites, and he squinted at the document. What's this last one? I leaned over. Fungus? Fungus, he finished. This examination must be completed before she assumes her new role as chairwoman of the board. All in favor? My hand shot up immediately as I glanced at Nicole. She sat frozen, her mouth slightly open, her tongue flicking across dry lips. Her gaze darted everywhere except toward me. Her shoulders hunched inward, arms crossed defensively over her chest. She was expecting someone to lash out at her. Not me. I wouldn't go near her, not even with my worst enemy's handshake, let alone a 10-foot pole. A few murmured apologies drifted through the room. Collectively, you dimwits. That means all together. Now, 1, 2, 3. We're sorry, Mr. Mercer. That was pathetic. Some of you at the back aren't even trying. I want enthusiasm. The absurdity of the moment nearly made me double over in laughter. These so-called titans of industry, these leaders of commerce, all chanting their regret like school children caught cheating on a test. Then I made the mistake of glancing at Marissa. She had spun her chair around, shaking with suppressed laughter, her fist pressed against her mouth to stifle the noise. That settled it. I had to put an end to this charade. All right, last attempt. Give me some feeling. Let's have rhythm, rhyme, volume cranked up to 11. And hey, why not jazz hands while we're at it? Marissa's barely contained giggles turned into full-blown hiccups. And yet, to my disbelief, these clowns actually followed my command. I recorded the whole thing on my phone for posterity. Then came the final blow. I calmly informed them that every salacious detail of their indiscretions, both with their assistants and my wife, had already been delivered to their respective spouses by courier. And with that, I told them all to get lost. They didn't hesitate, shoving past each other in their frantic bid to escape me and the disaster their lives had just become. Even the remaining members of the so-called leadership group slunk out more slowly. Pemberton lingered just long enough to guide a shell-shocked Nicole into signing the contract for her CEO position before making his exit. At last, it was quiet. I exhaled, sinking into my chair. Marissa, still suppressing a smile, reached out and cupped my chin gently. Are you all right? Her low contralto had the same effect it always did, a shiver down my spine. I gave a small nod. It's almost over, she murmured. And that was when Nicole snapped back to life. Get your hands off my husband. I turned to my soon-to-be ex-wife, utterly stunned. Was she out of her mind? I had just humiliated her in ways most people could only dream of, dragging her name through a legal record that would be available to every shareholder. She would likely be cited in multiple divorce proceedings and could even be sued. And now, she decided to get jealous. Marissa's expression hardened as she spun to face Nicole. That playful smile vanished, and I could practically hear the claws unsheathing. I had first met Marissa Whitaker 2 years prior when I built a cottage for her and her fiancé. It had been some of my finest work. From the outside, it was charmingly rustic, complete with a thatched roof, a picket fence, and a wildflower garden so carefully maintained that its chaotic beauty was almost an illusion. Inside, however, was a masterpiece of modern engineering. Every inch optimized, every feature seamlessly folding away into walls and cabinets. Marissa, being on the shorter side, had step stools built into the kitchen and other high-reach areas. These, too, were marvels of Italian design, folding and retracting in ways that sometimes made me think the entire house might one day collapse in on itself. It was a stunning blend of form and function, a perfect contradiction. Her fiancé died in one of those meaningless, freaky accidents that make people shake their heads and whistle. A lorry wheel came loose on the motorway because it was not put in correctly at high speed. The force of the load sent it soaring into the air, flipping end over end before gravity had its say. On the other side of the divide, a small sports car happened to be in the worst possible place at the worst possible time. If the timing had been off by just a second, no more, no less, the wheel would have bounced harmlessly behind or in front of him. But that was not to be. It landed right in his lap. And the wheel of an 18-wheeler? That's not something you walk away from. I attended her funeral, and when she had regained some sense of herself in the aftermath, I offered to complete the cottage at no charge. I even told her I could sell it for her if she preferred to walk away from the memories. But in her grief, she chose the opposite. She wanted to finish it, to live in it. not just a home, but as a monument to the love that had been lost. She spent nearly every day there, pouring her sorrow into the work. Of course, I was there too, doing what I could to help. As time went on, the vision for the cottage shifted. What at first was a picture-perfect showcase for the lifestyle they had aspired to now worked its way into something warmer, something more real. From model home into reflection of what they actually felt with one another: comfort, ease, and familiarity. Smooth, it wasn't. We debated and redesigned, improvised, trashed ideas, started anew. We argued and sulked, apologized, then argued again. But over the 6 months it took to finish the place, down to the last detail, we had built much more than just a house. We had built a friendship. No more than that, yet no less either. She told me about how she wanted to head back to the university to pursue her degree in medicine, to which, in turn, I shared with her my plans in buying a boat and heading around the world by taking one place at a time. The minute I thought this girl Nicole had been having an affair on me, Marissa had been the second person who got to hear. In turn, she helped me through my own stages of grief, just as I had helped her with hers. She gave me a place to vent, a shoulder to lean on when the anger felt overwhelming. And when I caught myself fantasizing about stabbing my wife in the face, it was her talking me down. She was always there when I needed her most. And then, idiot that I was, after months of suspicion, months of doubt, months knowing yet never having proof, I stopped loving Nicole, started loving Marissa. Contrast between the two of them made it almost inevitable. Nicole was tall, slim, sophisticated. Marissa was short, curvy, always bubbling with laughter. Nicole had sleek, dark hair and piercing blue eyes. Marissa had a mess of red curls and striking green eyes. Nicole was driven by ambition, relentlessly climbing her way to success. Marissa was driven by the pursuit of joy, determined to live life to the fullest. Nicole was cold, calculating. Marissa was warm, loyal. Nicole had used our marriage as a stepping stone, sleeping her way up the corporate ladder. Marissa, as I knew her, had not opened the door for any other man into her life since that fateful day he had died on. Nicole was my wife, Marissa my best friend, and now, about to jeopardize it, all because I happened to fall for her. Marissa had joined in with planning today. Sometime back it was nothing but fun to engage our imaginations over ways and means of teaching someone a good lesson. But as that plan crystallized, it took on something else, a path to closure. I don't really think she ever believed I would pull the trigger on it, but when I finally did, she was right by my side all the way through. She was even acting like my secretary that day. Of course, Nicole had another explanation for that end. "I've been watching you, spoiled brat. I know who you are and where you come from," Nicole shrieked, her voice cracking under the strain. "You think money can buy anything? You think you can buy my husband? Well, I've got news for you." She swung at Marissa's face. Marissa dodged easily and returned with a quick kick at Nicole's shin. Nicole let out a yell, falling onto the floor and clutching at her leg. "Nasty piece of work," Nicole spat. "Better than a cheater," Marissa shot back. Since that wasn't about to escalate into an all-out catfight, I intervened. I'd once made that mistake before, and the scar across the back of my neck provided a permanent reminder. Getting in between two infuriated women just wasn't the brightest thing in the world. No, they could rip each other apart, but I was happy to interfere once they'd too exhausted themselves to land one good hit. "Nicole, you've spent the last 2 years sleeping with half the boardroom. It's over." Her face collapsed. "Please don't say that, Nolan. You love me." I raised both hands, palms out. "No, no, no. Past tense. I loved you. Hear the D at the end? But you screwed that out of me. Now I don't." She scoffed. "Oh, come on. You made me chairman. You gave me the best gift ever. Of course you love me. And I'll never cheat again. Ever." "I give that promise a week. At most," Marissa murmured to me. I couldn't disagree. "It doesn't matter if it's tomorrow or never. The timing is irrelevant. We are done. There is no coming back from this." I exhaled sharply, my patience wearing thin. "I overheard 2 of your little colleagues joking about how long you've been the company's favorite pastime. Tell me, did you really disappear under the table and get cozy with that guy at the Christmas party while I was searching everywhere for you?" Marissa's hand clamped onto my arm. "You're kidding. Please tell me you're kidding." She stared at me, horrified. "I take it back. Not a week. Maybe a day, and even then, I wouldn't put money on it. Nicole's eyes filled with tears, but her voice still had that insufferable, self-righteous edge. Oh, come on. You knew. You had to know. You never said anything, so clearly you didn't care. I let out a hollow laugh. You're out of your mind. I didn't actually know until 6 weeks ago. Sure, I suspected, but I never had proof. Nicole shook her head, sniffling. No, you knew. You just didn't want to admit it. How exactly was I supposed to just know? I loved you. I trusted you. I never imagined you were running around with every guy who so much as glanced your way. But you didn't stop me, she said weakly. Are you serious? Marissa cut in, her voice laced with disgust. That is the biggest pile of garbage I've ever heard. You were sneaky. You made sure to keep your little games hidden where Nolan wouldn't catch you. You did it in your world, a world he didn't have easy access to. He didn't know because you made sure he wouldn't. And now you're trying to twist it into some kind of excuse? That's pathetic. Nicole's tears dried up almost instantly. Her expression hardened. Oh, look at you, little Miss Moneybags. Couldn't stand losing your fiancé, so you decided to buy yourself another one, even if he's second-hand. She sneered. All those little adjustments you just had to make in that ridiculous fairy tale house of yours. Admit it, you were trying to tie him down with your cash. Marissa stiffened, her fingers curling into fists. I never... She looked at me, her green eyes shimmering with hurt. That wasn't... I didn't... Nicole smirked, pressing the attack. Oh? You didn't tell him, did you? Didn't mention that you're dripping in money? Why not? Afraid he'd see right through you? Marissa turned away abruptly, and I knew she was about to run. And if she did, I might never get her back. I caught her hand and pulled her in, holding her tight. Hey, I whispered, as she trembled against my chest. She's trying to get inside your head. She wants to break us apart. That's who she is. That's what she does. She twists reality until people can't tell what's real and what's not. I glanced over at Nicole, whose smug expression sent a surge of pure loathing through me. Why do you think I could never prove her cheating? She could convince anyone of anything. Nicole's confidence wavered slightly. Nicole, that's enough out of you right now, unless you're ready to start asking people if they want fries with their meal. I let my words sink in before continuing, my voice calm but firm. I handed you that CEO position, but don't think for a second that means you get to keep it. You keep running your mouth, and I'll take it back just as fast. Hell, maybe I'll give it to Marissa instead. She's got a better head for organization than you ever will. Marissa, still clutching my arm, tilted her head up at me with alarm. The last thing she wanted was that job. Nicole, however, finally got the message. She wasn't stupid. She knew I held the power today. If I wanted to, I could call back the entire board and rewrite the agenda to fire her on the spot. Her voice was quieter when she finally spoke. If you hate me so much, why did you give me the job? I sighed. Nicole, I don't hate you. I did, for a while, but not anymore. I don't love you either. I let the words settle before continuing. You want to know why you got the position? Fine. 6 weeks ago, when I started planning all of this, I thought about what life would look like after the divorce. If you got fired, I'd be stuck paying you alimony. I'd have to work, to make money, so you could go on with your little extracurricular activities guilt-free, on my dime. And that was something I couldn't stomach. I smiled coldly. But if I promoted you, if you actually managed to do the job, and you ended up making more than me, well, then the tables would turn, wouldn't they? You'd be the one paying me, and that would be justice. Nicole's expression flickered. Oh, and imagine this, I added, my voice almost amused. Imagine me spending all day with other women, enjoying my life, while you're stuck at the office, grinding away to finance my pleasure. I exhaled, shaking my head. Now that would be karma. Marissa's eyes snapped up to mine, wide with concern. I could see the unspoken question forming on her lips. I cupped her face, brushing away the remnants of her tears with my thumbs. Relax, I murmured. I don't actually have a heart condition, but I could get a certificate that says I do. I gave her a knowing look. I have friends in some very interesting places. That did it. The tension in her shoulders melted away as she let out a choked laugh and threw her arms around me, burying her face against my chest. I'm sorry, she mumbled into my shirt, But I don't want to be your best friend anymore. Nicole let out a triumphant, mocking laugh. I turned and shot her a look so venomous she actually took a step back. I waved a dismissive hand, and she retreated to the other side of the room, giving us space. I looked down at Marissa, my heart pounding in my chest. "Really?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. She nodded. And just like that, all the energy drained from my body. My arms dropped to my sides, and I felt tired, just exhausted. The months of anger, of doubt, of chasing ghosts, it all crashed down on me at once. "I'm so sorry," I murmured. "I never meant to fall in love with you. I just wanted you to be my best friend. It just happened. And now I've ruined everything." Marissa's gaze locked onto mine, her green eyes huge and unblinking. "You fell in love with me?" she whispered. I let out a breath. "Yes, of course. And I'm sorry that it ruined our friendship." "You fell in love with me?" she asked again, her voice quieter this time. Damn. I had really stepped over the line. Should have kept my mouth shut, kept things simple. Now, I was staring down the barrel of a main course of misery, served with a generous side of creeping loneliness. I nodded, bracing myself for the inevitable. Why was she repeating the question? Marissa exhaled slowly, then said, "I don't want to be your best friend." I gave a stiff nod. Of course, I had known that was coming. But then she continued, her words deliberate. "I want to be your best love, your best life, your best wife. And, okay, your best friend too, but the other things first." Huh? My brain refused to process what she had just said. The words were in English, but they weren't falling into place properly. Marissa rolled her eyes. "Nolan Mercer, will you marry me?" I blinked. "Okay, but you have to get down on one knee to ask first." Not my best joke, but I was running on fumes. If we were going to throw humor into the mix, that was about all I had left in me. Without hesitation, she dropped to one knee. "Nolan, will you marry me?" I rubbed my chin. "Can't hear you from down there. You'll have to come closer." It was a weak attempt at playing along, but marriage jokes didn't sit right with me. Not in that moment. Maybe later, when I wasn't emotionally wrung out. Marissa stood, and before I knew what was happening, she had launched herself at me, arms locked around my neck, legs clamped tightly around my waist. The sudden impact sent me stumbling backward a few steps. "I am going to ask you one last time," she murmured, her face inches from mine. "Just once more, and I mean it. Almost. Maybe. No. Definitely. So listen closely. I love you, and you just said you love me. So, Nolan Mercer, will you marry me?" I swallowed. "You're not joking?" She frowned. "What? You think I go around proposing to men for fun? Why would you even think that?" I exhaled, feeling a weight pressing against my ribs. "I'm not very lucky," Marissa smirked. "Say yes, and I promise you'll get very lucky the second I get you back to the house." "Yes," I breathed. She kissed me then. Our first real kiss. Her glasses slid askew, but neither of us cared. Everything about it was backward, out of order, completely wrong. And yet, in that moment, I knew I had never felt anything more right. She tasted like sunlight and roses, like vanilla and autumn mist, like warm sand under bare feet, chocolate melting on the tongue, like everything good I had ever longed for in my messed up life. "Ha! I knew it," came a shrill voice from across the boardroom. Marissa and I turned at the same time. "Shut up, Nicole," we said in perfect unison. And for once in her life, she did. Maybe I wasn't so unlucky after all.